everybody. Welcome to the Monday episode of the Dog and Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips,
I'm Lena Phillips.
and we are here today because Lena helped me interview the great Jerry Craft. Now, Lena, what does Jerry do?
Jerry Craft illustrates and writes books for kids.
And he's written a number of graphic novels through the years, many of which my friend here enjoyed quite a bit. So we were able to have him come join us, talk to us a little bit about his process of creating these books, what it's like to be an author in this really booming market of kids' graphic novels, and how do you get your book out there? So I think we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
So here is Jerry Craft. I'm Orrin Phillips.
I'm Lena Phillips.
And we are so pleased today to be joined by Mr. Jerry Craft. Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's start from the very, very beginning. How did
Okay.
you first discover comic books?
My brother and sister are 9 and 10 years older.
Mhm.
And by the time I was conscious of comics, they already had them. So I remember seeing, I think some of them had I think my sister probably had the Archies and Casper and stuff like that. And then my brother had the X-Men and some Fantastic Four, some Silver Surfer, that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
What got you into writing/illustrating, and did you always want to become an author and illustrator?
I didn't want to become an author because I didn't like to read, so I never thought you could do one without doing the other. But I knew I always liked to draw. And so I always wanted to grow up to be like the next great artist of Spider-Man or something, but I had no interest in writing anything. And then as I started getting older, I started making my own comic books and I needed stories to draw. So I was like, well, let me figure it out. Let me make it up myself. And then slowly but surely that got better and better and better. And then it probably wasn't until late high school, early college that I realized that I did actually like to write. But I still didn't think of it as a career.
Now you write and you illustrate your own stuff. Could you ever see someone else doing illustration for you, or do you sort of need that balance between the writing and the art for yourself to keep the story going?
So that is the $64,000 question. And the reason is, um, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years in between my books. And that's kind of hard, when you get used to going to the big conventions, ALA and NCTE, and all your friends are going, and you don't have a book out, so you don't get to go. So that when you get used to it, it's kind of hard to go a couple of years without a book. Um, Especially when, you go to these places and you're doing panels and you're hanging out with Raina Telgemeier and Jeff Kinney and Lois Lowry and Gene Yang. You get used to that and you get spoiled. And then to be sitting in the house for 3 years without that kind of, camaraderie and excitement, I realized that it's gotten increasingly tougher to do that. So I think since it takes me about a year and a half to make a graphic novel, I may actually have to write other stuff that I then give on to someone else so that while I'm writing and drawing one project, I have another illustrator illustrating one of my other projects. But I've not had that happen.
Okay.
So I don't know what that's going to be like, to see someone else designing the characters and doing all this. And I know that they don't always let authors and illustrators talk to one another because they want the
Hmm.
illustrator to do their own thing.
Huh.
You know, so like the times, you know, like when I illustrated a book for Scholastic back in 2014, they didn't want us going back and forth talking to each other. I
Really?
talked to the editor or the art director, and he talked to the editor and the art director, and there wasn't any kind of like uh shooting each other notes and stuff. And that was tough for me to do, to be honest.
I just want to follow up. I mean, it just seems in the comic world for a long time it was, guys would sort of go back and forth, and now it seems like that's the same way it is now, that there's really not a whole lot of communication between the two sides. Is that sort of frustrating, because you kind of want the stuff to flow together, you would think, and you being in sync with what they're doing.
Yeah, you know, as an illustrator,
Mhm.
um, and as an author, like I see both sides,
Right.
you know. So if I'm illustrating a book for you, you know, there's a side where I don't want you to necessarily micromanage because you hired me for a reason. You know, you hired to get a Jerry Craft book and Jerry Craft's vision. So I wouldn't want you looking over my shoulder saying, oh, no, no, don't do, no, move that over there. No, move that. You know, and most authors aren't like that, but you do find a few.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, I also get it, because if you're doing something, a book about your daughter and her puppy and a favorite park that they went to, you know, um, I would like it, I would like to use those as reference. You know, I wouldn't want you and your daughter to get the book and be like, oh, this isn't what we thought of at all, you know, because it did come from your mind first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to hire an artist to illustrate one of my books and to not constantly be looking over their shoulder. So I'll have to give them the respect that you know, that I would want uh an author to give me.
What's your favorite book that you wrote?
So one of the things is it's I think New Kid will always be my favorite because that's the one that took me to the next level.
Yeah.
Um, although I'd like to think that each book that I do is better than the last. So I think that of the 3 graphic novels I've done, New Kid, Class Act, and School Trip, I would like to think that School Trip is the best written and best illustrated. But New Kid will always be like, you know, the first Star Wars to me, or the first Jurassic Park, or the first, you know, that kind of thing, where there's an emotional side to it as well. So that will probably always be my favorite.
How long does it take to write and illustrate one of your books?
So the first book of a series takes the longest, and that's because I try to figure out so much about it ahead of time. So in the first New Kid, I needed to know, you know, what's his name? Who does he live with? Does he live with his mom? Does he live with his dad? What does the neighborhood look like? What does his building look like? What clothes does he wear? Am I going to have him changing his clothes? What does his room look like? Who are his friends? What they look like? So unlike a prose book, which is all words, where I could say, oh, Jordan walked into his classroom and sat down. In the graphic novel, sat down next to who? What position is he in? What is he wearing? Are his arms folded? What's behind him? Are there books on the shelves? Does his school have a whiteboard? Does it have a smart board? You know, what kind of things are on the wall? So I have to it takes forever. That's this like world building kind of aspect to it, which actually kind of takes much longer. So by the time I did class act, I knew what the school looked like. I knew what the kids looked like. I had all those like nuances down. So it was much faster. But then when I did school trip, of course, I did not take the easy way out and just have them back in the school. I have them going to Paris.
Mhm.
So now I have to, draw the Eiffel Tower, and I have to do all the scenery from walking to the Louvre by the Seine River. And I had to do all that research. And I actually went to Paris twice, um, and took a lot of notes and video and things like that. So that's what I do for my readers. If I have to go to Paris for you,
Wow. That's
you're welcome.
Are you cognizant of your evolution as a writer and as an illustrator as you go along, or is it only when you look back sometime later and say, "Oh, okay, now I see I've grown doing this, or I changed doing that"?
What's funny is when I started working on Class Act, there were so many things that I learned, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this more more cinematic, where the characters in the front, I'm going to Gaussian blur them out, and I'm going to have this sharpen it." And my editor was like, "Hey, wait a minute, this is not even looking like the first book. Like, I understand you want to show what you've learned, but it has to look like it's a series."
Right.
So I had to kind of take it back a couple of steps. But there are times when I draw something and I'm like, wow, that doesn't look like I drew that,
Right.
which is kind of a cool thing, because it's like, to me, the evolution continues,
Mhm.
and I'm always trying to bring something new to the table. So when you get one of my books, it's like, you get that same thrill as when you got the last book.
Right. Now, just because a book comes out doesn't mean people are going to automatically go out and get it. There's a hustle that comes with it. And we've spoken to some other folks, and going to schools, going to cons, doing all these different appearances all across the country to get the word out about your book and to stir up, excitement about it. Could you talk a little bit about what goes on for you behind the scenes once the book's out to get people reading it?
So I just got home from Utah on Saturday,
Okay.
and I don't think I have been home for longer than 2 weeks
Wow.
in over a year. So School Trip, which is the last new kid, came out
Mhm.
in April of last year.
Mhm.
So it's been maybe 14 months of being on the road nonstop, and don't feel bad for me, because I mean, I've done schools in Hawaii, I did the Sharjah book festival. So with Raul III, my buddy, hanging out in Sharjah and Dubai and Abu Dhabi, uh, where they're launching the new kid in Arabic.
Oh, cool.
You know, I've been to Kenya with Kwame Alexander. Um, so it's a lot of work,
Mhm.
and with the amount of invites that I get for not only travel, but Zooms, interviews,
Mhm.
um, things along those lines, and to try to stay on track with creating the next stuff. So I've got my laptop that goes on the road with me. I got my iPad, and I'm drawing on the airplane. I'm in the hotel lobby, like that kind of thing. Plus, there are people who want me to do a cover blurb for them.
Right.
So, for example, with New Kid, I got a cover blurb from Jeff Kinney.
Mhm.
That's And so when you do that, you kind of want to return the favor. Like this is, Jeff Kennedy's blurb, funny, sharp, and totally real. Jordan Banks as a kid. Everyone would be talking about Jeff Kennedy, author of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I knew what a big deal that was for me to get that. So I also have to process that now I'm at the point where it's a big deal for some other artist or author to have a Jerry Craft cover blurb on their cover. But when do I get a chance to read those books? So I just read the new Leon graphic novel by Jamar Nicholas that's coming out from Scholastic. I just read that on my iPad. I have a paper copy, advanced reader copy of Snips by Raoul III, which is another graphic novel, which is coming out, which also looks great. So when I tell you that almost every second of my day, people are like, oh, well, what do you do in your downtime? I'm like, I haven't had downtime in 6 years. Like, I don't even know what that is, So luckily, I love what I do, and that energizes me, because I just don't get a lot of like time to myself.
Yeah. And just for the record, Jamar is one of the nicest people in the industry.
Oh, he's amazing. And every time I mention his name, people are like, oh my goodness, he is such a nice guy. I'm like, yeah, he really is.
Just well known.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part about being an author and an illustrator?
So a lot of it is fan interaction. And so, for example, I just came from Utah where I talked to 250 kids. And the adults there, they were having a writers camp, young writers camp. Like, well, we're not sure, but I think that some of them might want to get their books signed afterwards. I'm like, some of them. Usually all kids want their books. I mean, all adults want their books signed. And yeah, maybe a couple. And of course, all 250 lined up to get their book signed. It took about an hour and a half. And then before that, I was at ALA, which is the American Library Association's annual conference. And then you have all the librarians lining up to take selfies, and they are no different than the kids. They get just as excited and giddy and fanboying, fangirling, and wanting autographs and selfies and stuff like that. But then, like, if I walk around the street, one of the best things is nobody really knows me. I can just walk and go to Costco. It's not like people know who I am. If I go to a place where they're expecting me, they know. But very rarely, I've gotten recognized like twice in the airport, which was kind of weird. And one time in a restaurant in Virginia, at like 9 o'clock at night, So those are the kind of things that are pretty cool.
I want to jump for a bit and talk about Mama's Boys, because doing a comic strip, we've spoken to a few people, is one of the most grueling things one can do in the industry, because there has to be something every week. How did you get into it, and what was your experience like doing a strip?
So my Mama's Boys comic strip, so this is the book that I self-published back in 1997. Mama's Boys as American as Sweet Potato Pie. So this is the one that started it all.
Right.
And so it is a collection of black and white comic strips. So I did this starting in, I think, 1992. King Features picked it up for their weekly service. So if you ran a newspaper, you could subscribe to the weekly service, and each week you'd get a collection of comic strips, some original ones like mine. You would get some classic ones like Flash Gordon that like Jim Keefe was doing, and some of the other classic artists. And then you get horoscopes and all this stuff. So you could put together a newspaper. So I only had to do it once a week, one strip per week. It's not like Ray Billingsley, who does Curtis, or even now Jim Keefe is doing the Sally Forth comic strip, and it's like 7 a day. I mean, 7 per week, including a Sunday, the double page one in color. And that can be really grueling physically, emotionally. I know friends that, because when I first started doing it, I remember asking Ray Billingsley, I'm like, is it like having a 40-hour work week? Do you spend like 40 hours? And he was like, oh no, I wish I only spent 40 hours working on this. And then another buddy I just had lunch with said that his kids would come into his studio and he'd be in some weird position drawing, like, Dad, that's not a human position. Like, sit up straight. You're gonna mess yourself up. And then when you hear about like the manga artists with what they do, it's not for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself as a writer and artist during that time doing the strips?
So one of the big things is this is the third time I'm going to mention Jim Keefe. So,
Was also a very nice guy.
oh yeah, yeah. If him and Jamar had a fight to see who's the nicest guy, that would be tough. But of course they wouldn't fight because they're so nice guy.
Yeah.
They'd be like, "You're nicer. No, you're nicer. No, you're nicer." So we used to work together at King Features Comic Strip Syndicate. So we shared the cubicle. We were like back to back, and he did the coloring for most of the strips, and I worked with an editor to do like a lot of the corrections. So if Dagwood Bumstead had long sleeves in one panel and short sleeves in the other, I had to go in and change it, or something in the Spider-Man comic strip. And so we really got a chance to meet like legends. Fred Laswell, who did Barney Google, and Bud Blake, who did Tiger, and Mort Walker, and Ray Billingsley, and talk to a lot of these guys and ask, what pen do you use? Do you use a brush? How do you do your type? How do you do your layout? And because we were like really into it, was like a dream job for us, to be in a place where you could just learn all the time. And we were there when like Zitz got released, when Mutts got released, a lot of bad ones also, but those are like two of the good ones that came out while we were there. So I learned a lot about putting a strip together, timing. And Jim was the one that said to me that he liked Mama's Boys, but he didn't think it was as funny as I was in real life.
Okay.
So first I got insulted because I'm like, oh, you're saying my comic strip's not funny? And then, oh, wait a minute. All right, let me think about what he's saying. And it really changed the way that I did stuff, because I used to sit down like every Thursday night and like, okay, let me do this comic strip because it's due tomorrow. Okay, think. And then, you're trying to come up with jokes, and that's not really a good way to come up with stuff creatively, to sit down under deadline. And once he said that, he says, okay, well, basically he's saying that I'm funny in real life. So instead of sitting down to write stuff, let me just pay attention to the stuff that I say and do during the course of a day. So if I say something now that makes you laugh, I'm going to put that away. There's a thunderstorm here, so if you hear that in the background,
You had one come through here too. Yeah.
Yeah. So then if I say something that makes a lot of people laugh, then I'm like, oh, let me take that thing that's already funny and been approved with laughter and make a comic strip out of that, instead of forcing myself to just pull an idea out of thin air.
Makes sense.
What's your advice for young writers and slash illustrators?
To be young, you know, and know that it is a long road. And what I mean by being young is like still have fun, you know, because I will a lot of times like kids have sketchbooks, right? And so I'll be looking through their sketchbook, right? And the first thing is, oh no, don't look at this page. No, don't look at this. Oh no, don't look. Okay, this one's pretty good. Oh, here I messed up. Here I messed up. So they have like all the stuff, but they don't finish. They don't finish it. You know, they're like half a head and one arm with three fingers. I'm like, why did you draw it? Well, it wasn't coming out good. Well, finish it and then learn from it.
Right.
You know, so many young artists and writers have half finished stories, half finished drawings that they never complete, so they don't get better. You know, the more you draw, the better you get. And then like it, and then like don't get to the point where you're like balling it up and upset and like, oh, I don't want to, I'm never going to be an artist again. I'm never going to draw again. It's like, it is not that serious. So have some fun.
I'm curious, you know, you've been doing this for a while. The young adult graphic novel game has exploded. I mean, you guys are outselling Marvel, you're outselling DC. Um, from your perspective, when did you start to see this growth happen and the sea changes happening in the industry?
So in 2024,
Mhm.
I got a chance to illustrate this book for Scholastic, The 0 Degree Zombie Zone. Right. So I just did the illustrations. And this is the first time that I had anyone sending me anywhere. Right. So Scholastic sent me to the National Book Festival that was held in Washington, D.C. And there was a party, like a welcome party at the Library of Congress, which is amazing. And Gene Yang gave like the welcoming ceremony speech, and that was the first time I met him. I'm like, holy moly, that guy is good. I'd already been a fan of his from American Born Chinese, which is amazing. That's on my Mount Rushmore of graphic novels. And so Patrick Henry Bass, the author, and I go up, and we're first. So there's like maybe 50 people in the audience. And then after we come off stage, the next person is Raina Telgemeier. Now there's 200 12-year-old girls clutching like 5 different books, you know, and just like mesmerized. And then after that, you know, there was someone else that came up, and now there's, you know, 240-year-old men clutching their books, you know. What was the one I always, and they made a movie out of it, and he had to fight like his 7 evil ex-girlfriends.
Scott Pilgrim versus the
Scott
World.
Pilgrim, yes. So it was him.
Yeah.
And he went up, and now I'm seeing a whole nother, like these guys are just like zoned in. And then afterwards, they all signed along with like maybe Jeff Smith, you know, who does Bone. Maybe Jeff Kennedy was there. And you see this huge convention center just like, I mean, it was like a zombie rampage. Looked like, you know, Walking Dead, of just these looking for autographs, just like, and I was like, holy moly, like, I can't believe this is about books and reading.
Right.
And I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. Like I want to be one of those guys, you know, signing books for 1,000 fans.
Could you see yourself doing a comic book? Either, like a traditional with the big two, or even, something with Image or your own with a Kickstarter comic book, or are you happy doing what you're doing right now?
Oh, I am so happy doing what I'm doing now. Um, I like the middle grade. Um, I, I don't necessarily aspire anymore to do a book for Marvel in the sense of, the fan base of which I was a part of for, many, many years. Um, I don't want to be called out because in my book, I said Spider-Man's favorite color was red, but in 1967, when he's talking to Captain Stacy, he clearly says that his favorite color is orange, you know, and now I have 1,000 emails, 1,000 angry emails.
Yep.
So I contributed to this book, which is kind of cool, Marvel Super Stories.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. And I did a 6-page Black Panther story.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And they're working on the second volume now. And Jamar is in it, along with my buddy Tim Fielder.
Yep.
So that was kind of cool. And then one of the other things, so here's my Black Panther story.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then another like goosebump moment is that one of my all-time favorite Marvel comics, it was the Silver Surfer.
Okay.
And in fact, I just completed the set like last month.
All right.
I bought the one where him and Thor on the cover, like one of the best covers
Oh,
ever.
yeah. With the
Yeah.
rainbow.
Yeah, and I just decided, okay, I'm going to splurge and finally complete my set of all 18, so now I can move on with my life. So I had the originals. I still have the original Rise of the Silver Surfer, which is Fantastic Four, like 45, 46, and 47, something like that. And then a couple years ago, Penguin Classics was doing a Marvel collection on Fantastic Four, and they asked me to do the forward. So I did kind of a generic Fantastic Four thing. And then I got a copy of the book, and it was Rise of the Silver Surfer. So now it's like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby,
And you?
forward by Jerry Kraft. And I'm like, that's like when they talk about a goosebump.
Yeah.
Moments when I think of all those years of reading comics and wanting to visit Marvel. I still remember it's like 575 Madison Avenue. Like that was like Wakanda, like some magical thing. And that one day I would actually have my name there with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Are there any upcoming projects that you can share?
You caught me at a good time because we just made an announcement. So the one thing I can't say much about is I'm doing a new 3-book series, graphic novels, for HarperCollins, which is who did the New Kids series.
Right.
So I'm working hard on that. But then we just announced a collaborative effort with me and I don't know if you've heard of him, probably not. This guy named Kwame Alexander.
Okay.
He's not that popular. And he also won in Newbery in 2015. I won in 2020. And we have this like friendly rivalry. And So we just announced at ALA that we're doing the book together, and it's called J versus K, and it's the kid versions of ourselves who are also rivals.
Oh,
So you get to be, we will have our fans pick and choose. They want to be on Team K,
mhm.
meh, or Team
That
J,
looks a lot cooler to me.
right?
I
That's what I'm
mean,
saying.
it seems that way.
Yeah. So you've got good taste. Um, this will be out from Little Brown um, Books for Young Readers. And I believe the launch date is May 6th of next year. So it will be a Wimpy Kid style book, which is illustration, text with illustrations.
Where can fans find you? Any conventions or appearances coming up soon, or in the social way to get in touch with you and see what you're up to?
My website, jerrycraft.com. I probably haven't updated it in a while. But you get the gist of what I do. Probably not where I'm going to be because I just finished. I think this trip to Utah
Mhm.
is my last one until the new school season in September. Um, but on social media, everything is nice and easy. It's just my name, Jerry Craft, on Instagram, on Twitter or X, on Facebook. Everything's just Jerry Craft.
Awesome. Well, as a parent, I want to say thank you for all the wonderful work you do to get young people in the readings. I know she is so excited when she has your books and reads them and talks to her friends about them. So thank you.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I always like now it's like I remember again being such a reluctant reader.
Mhm.
And so I try to do the things that, I wish I had. So, I was like got a new kid sketchbook that has some drawing tips and a jigsaw puzzle that has like all the characters and, doing stuff for ALA where there are like, new kid bookmarks and t-shirts and stuff like that. And, it really has been a blast. And we're even working with Spring Hill, which is LeBron James's entertainment company with Universal. And there's a new kid live action movie in the works for theatrical release.
What?
Yeah, so we're working on that. And every week or so I stop for about 20 minutes and get something to eat and take a nap, and then it's back up and doing it all over again.
And we are back, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. Jerry is such a cool guest. His work on New Kid is very popular, as you could tell, because he
Yeah.
was very excited to talk about it. And that's a really cool story about how he's in the, I believe it's the Fantastic Four book that's out there. His name's right next to Jack Kirby. So that's a pretty high rank, even though we know our friend here is not the biggest Jack Kirby art fan. But
I respect him, but his art isn't my taste.
there you go. We can't wait to hear what Jerry's going to do next. We know there's so many great works coming out from him and all these other wonderful artists in this space. So, Jerry, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we will see you on Wednesday.